Call the meeting to order for the Reno Sparks Visitors Convention Executive and Legislative Committee meeting, August 11th at 3 p.m. Okay, roll call. Ann, will you lead us in the roll call? Roll call. Oh. I've got to have Ann do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Chair Rick Murdoch.
I'm moving. Here.
Councilman Charlene Bybee.
Here.
Commissioner Bob Lucy.
Here.
Ms. Ann Silver. Here. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Ann, will you please do the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Great. Okay. I'd like to, comments from the floor by the public, up to 3 minutes. Do we have any public comment?
There's none at this time.
Seeing none, we'll move on. Okay, item C, approval of agenda, executive legislative meeting, August 11th, 2020. I have a motion, and I have a second by Ann Silver. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. D, approval of minutes of the Executive Legislative Committee meeting, June 30, 2020. Any changes, any questions?
I move to approve the minutes of the Executive Legislative Committee meeting from June 30th, 2022 as presented.
We have a motion and we have a second by Ms. Silver. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. E, review and discussion, revision, and possible approval of survey questions to be utilized in connection with Reno Sparks Visitors Convention Bureau Authority Annual President CEO Review. Do you want me to go into any other detail? I'd like to turn it over to Ben Kennedy at this time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So everybody should have a memo that's not a part of the packet. So we got some more comments today. So the memo that went out yesterday is a little outdated. You should have a new standalone memo. Exhibit A to the memo are the board member survey questions. Exhibit B are the staff survey questions. These have gone out to the board. I've received comments from nearly the entire board, and I've compiled all those comments into the exhibits. So I think the thought today for reviewing the questions is we'll just go through each of them one by one. We won't take a motion on every question. I'll just sort of take direction and what the consensus is. I'll take notes. At the end of the meeting, we'll move to approve the questions as revised, and then I'll revise everything. We'll have a set of questions approved by this committee, and then we'll take those to the full board at the end of this month for board review and approval. If the board approves, then we'll send the surveys out. We'll conduct the CEO review at the end of September. So any questions?
Yes, Madam Chair, if I may ask a question. I guess I'm a little confused. I'm not sure the purpose of this committee, if the whole board is involved in input on the questions. It seems like we're going to have 3 meetings regarding this review.
No, so that's why we've used the committee. So I've gotten comments from all the board members. Have sent me their comments to these questions.
Right.
That's what I'm putting to this committee today. So what we're asking the committee to do is to sort of go through those, whittle them down, come up with a recommended set of questions. We'll take what the committee recommends and present that to the board at the end of the month. Hopefully by going through the committee first, it just narrows the discussion rather than going to the entire board and opening up the 40 questions.
We did go to the entire board.
Right.
So what if we delete some of them or we don't agree with all of them? Don't we end up back where we started from with a full board discussion of the questions?
Yes, so this committee, at the end of this meeting, I'll have direction on which of these changes you want, which of them you don't. I'll send them to the board. And yeah, if you have a board member that sent me comments that didn't get adopted by this committee, then that board member may want to have that discussion at the full board meeting.
Okay.
It's kind of what happened last time we did this, Ann.
That's
we
why
went
I'm
to the
asking.
full board. as they threw rocks at my glass house because I was
Yeah.
chairman of that
Yes,
board.
yes.
So I just wanted to say that it's okay, but it's the same format as what happened. If we go
Yeah.
through this, they may say, hey, well, we don't agree or whatever, but
I guess that's just my concern, Ann
Sure.
Silver, for the record, that there's just so much time involved in this, and I thoroughly respect the views of my colleagues, but what's the point of this committee if in fact it's the whole board? We could just do this with the whole board.
So I think the idea is hopefully when we go back to the whole board, we can say, here's 4 questions.
Right,
that
but
there's
that's what Rick
disagreement
just
on.
pointed out. We did that, and then we got slammed.
Right, but you didn't get the board's comments to the goals beforehand. You went through, the committee reviewed them. Here, we've gotten the board's comments in advance.
Yeah,
So you know what the board wants to see, and now it's up to this committee to decide what comments they're going to accept and which they're not. And so hopefully I can go back to the board and say, instead of saying, here's 40 questions that we have to go through at a full board meeting, I can say, here's 3 issues that are still sort of up in the air or where there's some disagreement. Let's talk about those. And then hopefully the board meeting is 20 minutes instead of 2.5 hours.
got it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
edify Ms. Silver's comments, with some historical value. Obviously, this committee has been the longest committee in existence, while other committees have come and changed and dissolved over the period of time that I've sat on this board. This one has always been consistent, and for the most part, this is pretty much the precursor and has always been the clearinghouse, so to speak, for these types of surveys. And trying to position ourselves in a way that is conducive without having that, so to speak, throwing rocks at the glass house, trying to clean this up as much as possible so that we don't spend
As many rocks.
an exorbitant amount of time during the board meeting to truly, because yes, it is ultimately at the pleasure of the entire board to make these decisions. However, I think the reason for the compilation of this subcommittee is to make sure that we can find some commonalities and some common ground that the board can and can't agree upon. And being that Mr. Kennedy has spent time speaking with a number of the board members in regards to these questions, and those are highlighted in that memorandum that was been passed out, that we can decide whether or not it should be there or should not be there. And then we can add that, I guess, but it really parses down the time needed during the regular board meeting so that it's not so labor intensive. That's always been the intent. I've never had, actually, I shouldn't say never. I said up until recently, we've never really had an issue with the survey questions that this board has produced. Or the subcommittee has produced, and it's really gone to the whole board and just had received unanimous approval based upon the experience from, and I think that was the reason why the members of this subcommittee were placed on here, because of that experience and that level of understanding prior to. Okay?
And I just want to streamline as best for our other fellow board members, but again, at the end of the day, they all weigh in, and that's the fair way to do it. Mr. Chair? Yes.
And I get what you're saying, Ann, but I also would agree that really the point of us not just doing what we did with the goals and objectives and then really getting that box opened up and taking a whole lot of time trying to come to consensus is that by asking people for their input, they've given it to us, so when we come up with what we come up with today, we're going to let everybody know this is based on what you told us and based on what the committee has decided today, so we're not in a vacuum. We've already gotten some of their input and direction with the intent that we can move it through more quickly, more efficiently. And the number of questions and the redundancies and complex questions and so much, I think people complained last year, and that was my first year doing it, on how long-winded it was and how some questions asked you 3 things and you had 1 comment. I mean, as an English minor, I was like going a little crazy with what the wording of these were. So it gives us that opportunity to do that. And Ben, what I would ask also, because we talked yesterday about this and what you sent us, we're going to go through all the questions here, get consensus on each question. Does it stay? Does it go? Is there a modification on it? But then we also, I think, looking at the one suggestion that put them into buckets that really made sense, kind of organizes it really well. So it's not just all over. You're asking one question about communication, and then you're jumping to strategic plan, and then you're all over the board. That putting them in those recommended buckets, a lot of these questions would fit in the different buckets, whatever ones we keep, and it makes, I think that's an easier process for people to, as they're doing the survey, it's strategic plan, it's communications, it's, whatever the bucket was, gives, I think, makes it an easier process for us and also for the board. So can you explain how, and if we're, I guess we have to decide if we're going to do that.
Sure. So if that's the direction the committee wants to take, so I would say sort of two parts. One, let's get through the questions.
Okay.
Two, there's an Exhibit C to this memo that sort of has some big picture comments. We can go through and discuss those. And if what this committee wants is to sort of organize these questions and that structure that's been proposed, then we can do that. Molly and I can do that, and we'll bring back to this committee sort of the approved questions, sort of put in that hierarchy.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question? I'd love to be able to weigh in at some point, and I can wait till the end of this. I don't want to sidetrack and get feedback from the group, so I just ask when you'd like me to, or when is best that I can at least share some of my thoughts going into this.
You want to do it now before we go through every question? What's the flavor of the committee?
Sure.
If I could just ask a procedural question. I'm sorry, Ann Silver for the record. I appreciate Commissioner Lucy's clarification and kind of reminding me of what had happened in the past. From a procedural standpoint, I think I thought the evaluation of the CEO would be predicated on his goals. And so this is an entirely different dimension of an evaluation, which is these kind of qualitative questions that I don't even know if I'm prepared to answer them. I was always just focusing on his goals and whether he'd achieved them or exceeded them. So I'm not sure why we have this whole array of sort of emotional questions and prospective answers, because I don't know how to quantify them. And some of them have wording, and we can go through them, that seem to me very subjective and perhaps not relevant.
Sure, so we'll let Vice Rezac.
What I'd like to say this going in, to me, I view two things here. One, we had his goals for numbers and what he produces as far as measurable numbers and goals. We did that. This is the merit part of his job as CEO, I believe, that how he runs the organization, et cetera, et cetera. I think Molly, you could maybe help me clarify that a little better. It's two separate things, the way I look at it.
So first of all, I want to go back to Exhibit B to his contract, which is also in your packet, is not Exhibit B to the memo. It's probably D, which is the CEO evaluation and compensation policy.
Exhibit A?
Page 16, I think, of the packet. But, and so I want to give a little bit of a historical overview of this policy. So it has been for as far back, we're talking from like 2000 is probably when I had the first experience with any of this, where historically there were always surveys done both with executive staff and board members as a tool to provide the board information related to the review. Fast forward a little bit, when we were going through the process that ultimately resulted, I believe, if I recall correctly, in Phil's DeLone's hiring, that was then called the Personnel Committee. The Personnel Committee, under the leadership of Mr. Farahi, went forward and actually put this policy into writing. And so if you see the CEO and evaluation and compensation policy, it goes to basically, there's two parts to the review. The first part is the merit type of review, whether or not somebody you have a job description, which is also attached to the memo, whether or not the person has done the job entirely. That's separate than the incentive. The goals that you do on an objective basis, the intent was always, historically, was that those are to provide the bonus And so those are the incentive goals, and they are specific, and, you know, there's 5 to 7 to 9 goals, however many the board sets for that year. This is more encompassing about overall how does the individual do the job entirely. And so the surveys were originally written based upon the position description, and then are used as a tool to help the board in that public meeting conduct the statutorily required open meeting review of the CEO. And so there was, and as this policy outlines, the evaluation process is the board wanted feedback from its fellow board members on just like you would do a performance evaluation for an employee, and also wanted to get feedback on the 360 type, executive staff type of review. And so that's why you see that here historically. And so it's to encompass the overall merit part of the job performance as opposed to just those more narrow, very number-specific goals.
So in 22 years, we've never,
No, it's changed and altered over time. That was my point.
Oh,
I'm just
okay.
saying there was some version of this as long as 22 years ago, but just as recently as Mr. DeLone's hiring, where the committee had actually put this process into writing as a policy.
Chair. So Molly, my understanding, because this is actually part of his contract, that we are obligated, as the contract reads right here on Exhibit B, to perform this type of evaluation because it's in his contract, which that's where we are today. If we should decide it's not something that has the value that we want it to, it would mean modifying or changing a contract at a future time through the board, through your legal guidance on
Correct.
how that would happen,
And there are two
but
ways
not
that the
today.
contract can be revised. First is if the board and the CEO, Mr. Harris, were to negotiate those types of changes, you could potentially change the policy in that manner if everybody was in agreement on all those terms. Alternatively, the contract itself has a time frame within which if you are going to renew the contract, there is a negotiation period. And so if you wanted to change the review process at that point as well, you could do it at that later date. So, but it is what is the process as it is laid out right now.
Thank you.
So basically, and if I may ask, if we wanted to change it, we'd have to go back before the full board and go through the whole procedure.
Yes, and I will tell you also, I want to be clear that we are agendized today to speak about the questions that are part of that process. If there is an idea that we want to attempt to change the overall compensation policy, that has to be agendized separately, and given the timeframes and wanting to get the review done, et cetera, it would likely could just go to the board entirely if that were the thought process.
Yeah, Charles, you want to, sorry, I've lost where we were headed.
No, no worries. Thank you.
Yeah,
First of all, thanks for the time and thanks for the clarification where we're headed. I just want to provide some context from my point of view. Certainly in the CEO evaluation and compensation, it's certainly clear what is outlined today. What I wanted to do is to make sure that at least I communicate my thoughts and best practices moving forward. And when we went through this last year, I learned quite a bit. And preparing for this year, I did a little homework, and I just want you all to keep in mind just some facts of what I discovered. When we went to go through this, I talked with both people locally here in Reno. I talked to people that are working in the DMO business within the state and then nationally about the process, just to better understand this. And I received feedback from 13 different CEOs. I talked to Steve Hill over at Las Vegas. I talked to our friends at the lake, and I talked to folks in Phoenix, Washington, D.C., Newport Beach. Branson, Baltimore, Orlando, Austin, Lake Charles, just to get some feedback, kind of what's done in those places for best practices. And I shared kind of our process, both from the board questions coming through, which there were 22 originally, and 23, I believe, for the staff. And I'm not going to read everything here, but just a couple comments from folks that said, yikes, to good Lord, is it just sent up to Jesus for his feedback as well. Not one person locally within the state, including Las Vegas, or nationally, does any sort of survey as it relates to the KPIs and the compensation goals. I think it's important to get feedback from the board. I have 9 bosses that I'm being evaluated with. I'm being evaluated by every day, and I think that's important. And I think learning from surveys is absolutely important to grow. I personally don't believe that they should be linked to the performance review. And I just want to read one quick note from a person who was approached by me, and this is the president and CEO of Visit California, who oversees the tourism for the entire state. And here's what she said. When I asked her what is done, and is it similar that they ask surveys of the board and of staff in the CEO evaluation. And she wrote, Charles, I have never seen this practice from other DMOs and certainly not in our organization. Incentives and bonuses related to compensation should be strictly tied to the goals discussed and agreed upon either in the CEO's employment contract or the year prior when setting out the plan for the coming year, period. They are 2 distinct exercises which serve different organizational purposes and never should overlap. Connecting these 2 actions do not serve to advance the organization and in fact makes it hard for a CEO to be effective in managing staff and operations. Finally, our governance policy strictly encourages all personnel related to discussions be held in confidence to protect any potential liability issues that could emerge from public discussions. So I just wanted to share that information and the research that I did. I understand that it's in that and would have to be revisited if it ever wants to be altered, but across the board, from the folks in Las Vegas to across the country, it's just not linked. So thank you for hearing me out and look forward to going through the questions.
Chairman,
Thank you.
Chairman,
Yes,
if
Mr.
I may.
Massey.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, and I understand Mr. Harris's, I respect Mr. Harris's position on a number of these things. Obviously, DMOs across the country and obviously within our state see everything different. And we've always established that Reno Tahoe is very much a unique organization. Multiple DMOs across the country do not have gaming. Multiple DMOs don't have the level of participation from involvement from the cities to the stakeholders that we do. So every DMO is very unique in its way of doing things, and I understand that there is probably a boilerplate process across the industry to do these types of things. However, Reno is, as I've said, very unique, and has 3 different municipalities in which it services. And also services gaming, business, and a multitude of things, and acts as it's as it started as the Washoe County Fair and Recreation Board and has evolved into the Reno Tahoe DMO. It's very different than many other DMOs. Many other DMOs are singularly owned by one city. Many DMOs are operated, if they are operated by multiple municipalities, they have different interfaces in them. You have a lot of singular, through gaming, you have a lot of singular property, actual owners, not just GMs and different things like that. So this is a different process than you would see, and this is not for response, but this is more of just edification. I just, for this board, I see that this is whether or not this is for merit or for contractual. Mr. Harris did agree to these terms when initiating this contract with us, understood these terms going into this, I believe, with eyes wide open, and that this has always been this process that this board and this organization has adhered to. Now, if there are substantive changes that need to happen to an employment agreement or how evaluations are done or compensation, those should be brought to the board as a whole in a subsequent meeting. But as Ms. Rezak and our legal counsel has pointed out, not agendized to speak to that today about why the process is what the process is. Our task today is to just identify whether or not the survey questions that have been provided to us and recommended for either existence or non-existence within the survey should be considered or not. That's really what we're here to discuss today. And I don't want to move too far away from that idea. I think that it's important, whether or not we agree or disagree, whether this should be part of the evaluation or not, we need to go through the process today. And so we need to keep our eyes, eyes focused on what we're here to do and the task in front of us. And so, I mean, I have my own opinions, but I think that what we need to do is continue to focus on what we need to accomplish today so that we can get through these tasks and do it in a purposeful way that provides positive and constructive input for Mr. Harris and the organization without having it be a deterrent to the overall progress of the organization as a whole. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lucy. So can we proceed with the the questions? Thank you.
Okay, so I think probably the easiest way to do it, if I just ask everybody to open that memo you have to the Exhibit A, which is the board survey questions. Let's just run through them, and if there's no comments, we'll move on. If you want to stop and discuss any of the questions, we can do that as well. So we'll just start. Question number 1, Charles Harris has developed the strategies and objectives for the authority, including but not limited to updating the comprehensive strategic plan.
Ben, if I might, I don't see here listed a comment that I sent to you, which was, I think the number or degree to which you can respond strongly or agree, neither, disagree, or strongly disagree, or overly complicated. You either agree, disagree, and if you don't have an opinion, that's really sad. But I think you either agree or disagree.
So that's actually in Exhibit C is where I put that comment, which is sort of process comments.
What?
So we can definitely have that discussion.
Oh, okay.
So sort
So
of
back to the number 1 question. Is there any questions on this question?
no issues?
Well,
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Kennedy, can we, on each of these items, will there be an availability, and I think to Ms. Silver's question is, will there be an ability to be a comment added, if there is for a reason or clarification instead of a strongly disagree to agree, but more clarification to an answer?
So we have, at the end of the survey, we have the open-ended, anything else you want to add, where you can
No,
put
but
in
I'm
a
saying for
narrative.
each specific question, is there the ability at each specific question for a comment period?
It's via SurveyMonkey.
Right.
So in that process, I believe that you can have it where it's the range, agree, neutral, disagree, or whatever range you decide to.
Right.
But I think you can also add a comment box with each question.
Okay.
If that is what is desired.
Well, are we permitted to change from these 5 categories to fewer? Okay, so
Yeah.
that's before you get to the questions, that's my comment.
Okay.
They
so-
precede the questions.
Yep, or we can have that discussion. Are there any issues with that, or is there any reason people would not want to go to 3 response options versus the 5?
I see no issues with going. Agree.
Agree, disagree, and neutral, no response.
Thank you.
Oh, too many are
And
on. So if we're not speaking, make sure to turn the mics off.
As long as there's clarification on each question, I would make sure that
That there's a comment box
there's a
with
comment
each
box
with
to-
each question.
Yes.
I have a comment. I think possibly a better way to, I think, on getting input is if we take each of these questions and we put them, Molly and Ben put them into the categories, and then having comments under strategic plan categories, which might include 2 or 3 of those survey questions, that if we lump it together for survey, to get a better picture, can we do it under, do the same thing you're asking for, Bob, but put it in each category instead of every single individual question? Because you go through it, by the time people get through a little ways in, they're like, I'm just going to put agree, disagree for time's sake. But I think if those are grouped in categories that make sense, it gives you the opportunity, whether it's that question or the overall strategic plan category, that you can make those comments.
And I see, and obviously through the chair to Councilwoman Bybee, I agree with you, and I see what you're trying to do to make it more streamlined. However, when I do these surveys, and I've done these obviously for the county manager and for the fire chief multiple times over, and I do enjoy, I specifically like to work through the question that I have specifically, because it's a question in front of me that's cueing my understanding, and I want it to be relevant to the question and why it's relevant to the question, because if it's just a box at the bottom of the category, it doesn't allude to, because not everything is specifically tied to the strategic plan. Not every question is tied to the budget. Not everything is tied to, outreach and different things like that. I want to be able to, as the question is presented to me, be able to comment on why I've made my position and where I am. And I think that's the reasoning behind why I'm trying to accomplish that. And I don't know why that would be an issue, giving people more opportunity to comment and provide feedback to Mr. Harris in regards to specific, because it's identified in regards to why the answer is what it is, and it might be a supportive answer, it might be constructive an answer, but it's an answer specific to each question. And so I have done this on all of my boards, and I think it's imperative. It gives everybody the ability to read through them and anonymously read through them and filter feedback, whether they feel it's relevant or not, and really, this is not for everybody else but Mr. Harris. This is feedback for Mr. Harris to really digest and see what he feels is relevant and not relevant, to bring forward to the board based upon that, and answer to those questions specifically about his performance based upon how the questions are worded. So I personally would prefer to see one, and if they don't fill it out, that's their prerogative not to fill it out. But I think it's important to have that intent on each question.
Mr. Chair. And I understand where you're coming from, so maybe that is all the more incentive for us to really look at how many questions we're asking. And we don't ask 25 questions because a lot are redundant. So that might be a driver in condensing to the key things that we want to be including on the survey with comments under each one. I think that would be incentive for me to really see which of these just are repetitive and which ones we can really put into those boxes and be more concise in what we're doing, and do the comments after each of those, but not with 25 questions. So I guess we'll see when we get there. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I just, in reference to Mr. Lucey's comments, Commissioner Lucey, I appreciate what he's saying. How do you evaluate people's written comments? How do they get scored, or what do you do with them?
I believe you just list them, right? So you'll have a numerical value for each question, and then if people comment, you'll have list the comments.
Correct. It's just, again, a Survey Monkey.
No, I understand the process. What I'm asking is, if I put agree, let's say we get down to agree, disagree, neutral, and I write a comment, how does that comment affect my answer?
You get a report from Survey Monkey, and it's the first question, and there will be, for the board, there should be 9 responses. And so if 9 people agree, it'll put 9 up there.
Right.
And then if anybody wrote a comment under that graph showing 9 agree, it will write out exactly verbatim whatever is typed in there.
How is that scored? I mean, how do you
It's
build that back up?
It's just,
That's all I was asking. So it's just a comment?
yes.
Okay, fine. That's all I need to know. Got it. It's your way of expressing why you respond. Okay. I mean, he's getting,
Okay.
he has to read those comments.
Okay,
Learn from it. Got it. Okay.
okay, we got this. I kind of agree with Bob. I'd like to make a comment on everything and may not have a comment on everything. So I just want to streamline the questions so we can get fair and equitable questions that are relevant to Mr. Harris. Thank you.
All right, so I think I'm hearing that first question. I think we're good with that. That question number 2, Charles Harris has provided direct management of a senior executive team to ensure the execution of board policy and strategic direction to brand the area as a world-class tourism destination. No comments received. Any discussion? Okay, move on to the next one. Number 3, Charles Harris represents the authority well in its relationships with local clients, government agencies, professional, and other similar groups. Any additional comment? Seeing none. Number 4, Charles Harris serves as the recognized spokesperson for issues of importance to the authority and maintains a positive image of the authority in the relevant media, and we did receive a suggestion that this question be deleted.
I recommend it be deleted. I don't know how I'd evaluate that. How do I mean, I assume he's the recognized spokesperson. He's the only CEO we have. So I think this is kind of a throwaway question.
Okay, so the way it works, so unless I hear anything other, yep, then I'll delete it in my next draft. Number 5, Charles Harris provides long-range planning for destination resources, infrastructure, and strategic direction. No comments received. Number 6, so there was a revision there. I've got the red line. I guess maybe easiest just to let you read the red line and see if there are any issues with the question as revised.
I guess I just have one comment, and I'm sorry to be struggling with this, but it's our opportunity to comment during this meeting. If we evaluate the achievement of specific goals and objectives, then how would I, if he's done those or exceeded them, how would I not then agree that he's dealt with key operational and financial targets and strategies effectively? How would I mean, if he met the goal or achieved or exceeded the goal, how do I answer number 6? You could have people saying no, if we know that he's done these things by looking at the completion of goals. I'm just curious. I just don't even know how I'd respond to this question. It's not really a question, it's a statement.
Right, and so I think just based upon conversations that the committee and the board has had in the past, is that the incentive goals are, again, 5, 7, 9, however many goals there are, very distinct issues. The job description encompasses a much larger role. And I think all of the survey questions are trying to gather information more on not only those objective goals that you already set, but more of the other roles a CEO plays, because you have a quite extensive position description, and I think it's just trying to get that information. But it is completely up to what the committee and the board wants to do.
Sure, and I mean, I'm not advocating for any of these questions, so your comments are well taken. It's up to the committee to decide. I'm just presenting.
I just don't think we are in a position to evaluate whether he manages the organization efficiently on a day-to-day basis. I'm not in the weeds here. I don't know what he does day-to-day. I assume if the organization is accomplishing its goals and objectives, it's being managed effectively, but maybe this statement is supposed to pertain to something else. If it does, I don't know, but I'm just thinking how I would read it and how I would best respond to it. I mean, we have only one employee, and that's Charles.
I think that's a tough one to measure. I would agree with Ann that really we're not here every day. We're assuming if the goals are being met on the other objective evaluation, that those key operational financial targets are being met or they're being reset. So I think it's kind of it's hard to measure and not something that I think maybe is appropriate
But
to
once
be
again,
on this.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman, I don't mean to step over you. I'm sorry. I think the intent has always been, once again, this is not to be measured or scored. This is to provide information to Mr. Harris in regards to response and communication and the ability to, as new information, new groups, new opportunities become available, his ability to respond to those in a timely manner and implement those, whether they be relevant or not, at his discretion. I think that's really what the intent of this question is, to say, when new opportunities apprise themselves outside of the annual financial goals and fiscal measures, that if things that come to fruition that may not have been during a budget cycle, is he able to adapt, move quickly, decide whether or not they're viable or not, bring those to the board for discussion, and provide solution-based plans to either make those viable or not. And so I do see relevance in this question. I think that this question has a particular nuance to it as it pertains to how is he able to respond. Is he nimble? Is he dynamic? Is he willing to look at new business and change new business? I know that was one of Mr. Farahi's major directions when he drafted this the first time, that this was part of that discussion. It was about new business. Mr. Baum, and this was one of the issues with Mr. Baum and Mr. DeLone, was their ability to accept new business and how they responded to that. So I think that's really, once again, this is not about scoring or advising or trying to evaluate his specific day-to-day operations within the organization. This is about, as new business comes into the organization, how is he about responding to those pieces of new business and what that looks like? Because day-to-day, this thing changes very differently than any other organization within our community. This organization responds very quickly to tourism and new opportunities very quickly. So those are my comments. I think it is relevant, and I'd like to keep it in the survey.
I do have a comment, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I would cross out the word efficiently and maybe put effectively, because I think that's what you're getting to, Chair Lucy, Commissioner Lucy. And I think if your view of this was his adaptation to changing conditions, I see changing conditions having been struck here. And I think what you're really saying, does he manage effectively and nimbly and is able to change reactions or strategies to key operational financial targets and reset accordingly? There's a different way to say, I think, what Commissioner Lucy was saying that's a little clearer than whether I'm in the weeds watching him day to day. I think the day-to-day thing is silly.
I agree with what you both just said, but I want to say this, it's pretty simple, because it's the 4 issues: financial, strategies, key operations. I mean, he's got to make a lot of those decisions. Do we agree as a board or disagree as a board that he's doing it?
Right.
And then if you had a comment, Bob, to your point, you have the comment line. So I agree with you. I'd like to keep it in and modify it.
And so I would agree with Member Silver, Ms. Silver, in regards to changing that to maybe efficiently to effectively, and take out the day-to-day basis, effectively adapt to in response to new information, changing conditions, unexpected obstacles. It's more of an adaptation as it pertains to financials, new business, things of that nature.
So if I could read maybe a proposed revision based upon these comments. Charles Harris manages the organization effectively by adapting in response to new information, changing conditions, or unexpected obstacles, and measures organizational effectiveness, or I guess maybe, sorry. In response to new information, changing conditions, or unexpected obstacles, measuring key operational and financial targets and reset strategies accordingly?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Wordsmithing.
Thank you.
Moving on, we're getting some momentum here. 7, Charles Harris effectively communicates with board members, stakeholders, business executives, other civic leaders, takes initiative to pursue opportunities and improve coordination of the RSCVA and important stakeholders, and understands consensus building and empowerment and stresses their usage community-wide. And we've had one board member suggest making the change noted, and one board member suggests deleting that question.
Ann Silver for the record.
Ms.
This
Silver.
is- I'm sorry, this is just a run-on sentence that I think is so broad. I'm not sure what it's pertaining to. It's a communication with board members, stakeholders, I don't know who are the business executives, and other civic leaders, takes initiative to improve coordination of the RSCVA and important stakeholders, which are sort of reflected in the question before, and understands consensus building and empowerment and stresses their usage community-wide. I would have no idea what that means. How do I know if he's understanding consensus building and empowerment and stresses their usage community-wide? Those are a lot of words. I think there's a better way to get to what this question is trying to ask. I can't wordsmith it right at this moment, but it's a very long sentence.
I think I agree with Ms. Silver too, Mr. Chair, that maybe that last sentence be struck and just allow for, this is just really trying to get to the heart of his ability to communicate with board members, stakeholders, and community leaders within the region, and takes initiative to pursue opportunities to improve the coordination of the RSCVA within the region, or something of that nature.
Yeah, I would agree.
And just strike the last line, and understands consensus building. I don't know if that, hopefully, Mr. Harris understands that being collegial and empowering, is, I mean,
Begs the question.
I mean, you could be, hopefully rocks understand being collegial.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is, I think that is a little, I think to Ann's point, this is a little bit run on and a little bit over too much verbiage in there, just as that his ability to communicate with board members, civic leaders, and business executives for the importance of RSCVA and the region.
Yeah, I like that.
Something to that extent.
Agree.
Well, and I would also add, we've got a lot of these same things we're saying in multiple questions coming up that are repetitive. So maybe as we get to the ones that we've already covered that, there's some of the others we might knock out. Because we keep doing the stakeholders, we do communication with board members, and it just, in different manners, we're saying that in a whole bunch of these. So
Very
if we,
repetitive.
yeah, if we move forward to condense and to knock anything out that's repetitive, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay, Ben, where are we at?
So I think we're on 8 here. 8, same, take a look at it. One board member suggested deleting it, the other has suggested adopting the changes as shown.
I don't know why it's in there at all. Yeah.
We just mentioned, the last one says communicate with board members, and part of that
Yeah.
communication would be keeping board members up to date on issues.
I think it should be
You've just
scratched.
repeated
I'll take
yourself. Let's knock it out.
So 8 gets scratched.
Yep.
Number 9, there's some suggested changes shown in the red line.
It's a really long,
This one for me is important. Obviously, this was before Mr. Harris's employment with the RSCVA. The intent was to get quality feedback from our exhibitors and whatnot in regards to their response. I think Mr. Harris has done that significantly through a number of different acts. So I don't see this as a diminishing or pejorative question to Mr. Harris. I think this is more about, this is available, is he been providing high value to the customers, and when feedback is coming in, this is more of that customer response. And a lot of this onus was when we didn't have the buildings in-house. And so a lot of, he was, the CEO at the time was responsible from communicating with our third-party vendor, our property management team, to get that feedback. And so now that is in-house, I do see it important that he probably is overseeing that feedback from the operations team and how that feedback is being translated into new strategic plans going forward and how, or adaptations to offerings for new customers.
Okay, I do have, Mr. Chair. And I agree. I think it's important, you know, that it's kind of places a high value is a little bit subjective, you know, I mean, but as far as the, it is a priority of providing that quality service. And actually, I was the one who wrote the condensing it to what's been edited here that has the high value, encouraging and acting on feedback from customers. I don't think we need all the stuff in the middle. It just gets real wordy and you lose what the point. The point is, you know, high quality and then encouraging and acting on feedback. I think that's kind of what we're looking for, isn't it?
Yes, Ann Silver for the record, I totally agree with your comments, and I agree with the value that Commissioner Lucy's placing on it. I think I would suggest striking the word high, because I don't know if it's high, low, medium, or that's pretty subjective.
Yeah.
And I also don't know if he's encouraging and acting on feedback. I assume he would, or he wouldn't achieve his goals and objectives. So I'm not going to argue the point of deleting it. I just think it's another throwaway question. While I totally appreciate and respect the value that Commissioner Lucy's placing on customer service or customer responsiveness, I don't know how to, and I wouldn't know. I'm not a customer.
I agree with Mr. Lucy, and here's why. We had this out of house for so long, and Charles has been good enough to take it back in-house. We do the cabs. He finds out what's going on, but I do believe he's going to hear through his team. He has a value on hearing from his team that the customers are happy, that they don't want a refund because the food service wasn't there, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm thinking I do like some part of this. I like it streamlined down like you did, Charlene. I just like, and I don't like the high word high, I agree with that, value, because I think it's super important, because we had a lot of customers during the other, it wasn't anything he had to do with, that were unhappy with the middleman. So I just think this is important a little bit.
So would
I
it
try?
help if you just, would it make a difference to anyone if we knocked out encouraging and just put acting on feedback? Because we don't know, that's not an immeasurable also of encouraging, just acting on feedback.
Can
Molly?
I try a change? Maybe Charles Harris ensures that the RSCVA provides a quality service to its customers and acts on feedback from customers.
I think I think that it's right to the heart of it. This is exactly what LVCVA does in regards to they have a quality control position that lives within the convention center for them, that works with conventions, does post convention surveys, and is respondent. And we don't necessarily have that identified position within the organization currently, but under Mr. Harris's employment and is our operations manager, and through him he can provide that information to Mr. Harris about how conventions go, and they're either going to the operations coordinator or they're going directly to the CEO in regards to how the convention went, what his response was, how they're because remember, a lot of this is important for return business, and in continued business is what we want to do, is try to capture, not only capture new business, but retain existing. And I think really that's where the heart of this question gets to, is that ability to respond appropriately if there was any issues during a conference, an event, whatnot. So I see there's relevance in it, and so commentary by any board member, that has seen that from any level would be relevant to Mr. Harris in his performance.
Thank you. So we're going to go with your rewrite. Thank you.
Sorry. Number 10, same comment. Board members suggested some revisions.
I'm not sure that he's had any legislative activity as of yet. I hope not, but I don't know what it means, active advocacy role in promoting, that's his job. I mean, I'm not sure what this is like a subjective kind of throwaway thing that I just don't even know what it's asking me to evaluate.
If I may, to me, it's, we don't hire a lobbyist here.
Yeah.
Would be-
And is it, if any legislative issues pop up, because you guys are all in this business, a lot of our board members. Sorry, a lot of our board members are in this business. To me, we're gonna be advocating all of us as one
Exactly.
big happy family, so it seems like.
Yeah, I don't see the relevance.
see-
I don't see the relevance in the question, being that we have Black Wadhams, as our representative in Carson City. We don't currently have any legislative issues. And to Ms. Silver's point, there is really, this is clearly outlined as his role as the CEO is to participate in those legislative needs and adequately employ or deploy resources as he sees need for an advocacy role. It's really not his role to be an advocate legislatively, and if need be, he can go down and advocate specifics, but I don't see that this being something that pertains to his overall performance.
I would agree, and I think that's why we have lobbyists. And the lobbyists will come to us, and obviously he and the board will be apprised of what we need to do if there is legislative activity that we think we need to have a voice in. I agree. It's no point
Strike that one.
just to delete it.
Actually, the only time you ever would do this is, I remember when Phil really had to get into advocacy was when we were expanding the convention center. He would have to speak to, if we did go to legislative action on it down in, say, Carson.
Lobbyists will do that
He,
for us.
and they'll do it, but
They'll bring us.
something, yeah, they'd bring you to it and you'd all speak to it. Anyway. I agree. Strike.
Okay, number 11, you can see the board member suggestions.
Isn't that his job?
Isn't this his job? I mean, this is so.
And I'll just say, again, this is what you are evaluating. So this is the tool to get information on how well he is doing the job. That's why there are questions like, you agree he does these things or he doesn't do these things. I think that's what the intent of the questions are.
And remember, I just want to make sure, I understand some of these are redundant, but I don't want to get bogged down in the idea that this is an ability for time for each board member to provide feedback, whether it's the current board or a subsequent board. They have to have the ability to provide feedback to Mr. Harris in many different facets. And whether we see it as this organization, as this body sees it as relevant or not, there may be other board members that do see it relevant, that they have abilities to comment on these. I'm much more of a less is more kind of guy, and if you can't say it in three words, why say it at all? But I find that this does pertain to his involvement within the community, and how does the organization, and it definitely correlates to the current strategic plan that Mr. Harris has brought forward in regards to more integrative community engagement than any of our other CEOs prior to him has, and how he sees that effective, and the effectiveness of that, and how the board sees that being effective. And so that's why I would say maybe not it's maybe not necessary and a little redundant, but it provides for the ability for any board member to comment based upon his role within the community and how he is representing the RSCVA at these functions or within. But I think community functions. I should say Charles Harris is a respected community leader for the RSCVA, and his intentions align with the community involvement and strategic objectives set forth within the strategic plan, something of that nature. Not necessarily specifically about how he behaves or acts at community functions. It's more about what is his community involvement, and really, is he reaching out to the community? Is he participating? And how do board members see, and how are board members perceiving that participation?
Mr. Chair. Can I make an attempt of, we still have too many words in here, and would it work if we did Charles Harris represents the RSCVA in the community and aligns community involvement with the strategic objectives, or with the objectives of our strategic plan? Will that kind of move us where it encompasses what you're saying? It's less wordy and it kind of is, yeah, whether you're respected or not, you still have to be out there.
Well, it's feedback, but it's also, as was noted, this is also part of my compensation, so it's not just feedback. It also relates to how I'm being compensated, according to what Molly said. Right?
Well,
That's why I'm asking, how's it scored?
well, wait a minute. So going back, this is not what Molly said. What Molly said is that this plays a role in the overall perception. This helps paint a picture, so to speak, for the board in front of Mr. Harris in regards to when his compensation, based upon once his goals are met, they can choose not to or to approve a merit increase. And this is about a merit increase aside. There are two different tracks here. So there is a very fiscal, outlined, data-driven goal set. This is not what the intent of the survey is today, is to provide a understanding about the culture of the organization and the culture of the board and the culture of the CEO so that there is synergy amongst the board members and amongst the organization to, you may hit the goals, whether those are organically hit or not. However, this provides the board with some perception about behavior, mannerisms, understanding, reception to those, so that for everybody in a public process, because we so much love a public process here, that allows us to really evaluate that. And it's anonymous so that you can internalize whether or not you choose to believe it's relevant or not, and bring that to the board maybe for situations or awareness for future changes, whether that's strategic within the organization, whether that's strategic within your own office, however you see it fit. But those are relevant comments, because this is the feedback that you're getting direct, straightforward to you without unabashed.
All right, number 12, we've got a suggestion to delete that one.
Yes, I would agree.
All right.
I think we've really addressed it, number
Bob,
6
any
already.
question?
It's
Bob?
redundant.
It's
Charlene,
number same
we're
as
good?
6. Yeah, we'll delete.
Okay. Same with number 13, we've had a suggestion to delete that question.
I would recommend deleting it.
Oops,
Yeah, I recommend deleting that one as well.
yeah.
Okay. Same with 14, suggested deletion.
No, I don't think so. I believe that this is a driver for Mr. Harris in regards to his ability it gives individuals the ability to evaluate Mr. Harris on his drive, maybe change the wording, but I think the intent of 14 was always to establish the drive behind Mr. Harris and his ability to identify either new initiatives or bring programs back, which he's done significantly, and it allows for the board to highlight what they're seeing, because it might not be outwardly facing in regards to Mr. Harris's performance. A lot of these things happen behind the scenes, but this allows for public input in regards to, and remember, this is a public board. This is not just in a chasm. This is something that we have to do, that we feel that he is ambitious in regards to setting strategic goals, setting goals for himself, and really driving the organization forward. I feel that this does have pertinence, maybe not worded in that sense, but where is his drive align, and what is his focus for future strategic goals and plans and whatnot. So that's how I would see it in regards to developing not only goals and excellence and impacts and initiatives to maintain and adapt programs that benefit the organization, but something to the effect that Charles Harris has established acceptable goals, not maybe ambitious. I would strike ambitious. I would say goals for performance and impacts and initiative I would get excellence. And first of all, if you're not here to be ambitious and provide an excellent service, then I think we're just trying to overword this. I think it's really about the ability for Mr. Harris to establish goals, impacts, and initiatives, and maintain and adapt programs that otherwise further the organization. I would say something to that effect versus excellence and ambitious, and I would strike that. But it's really, do we feel that Mr. Harris has set forth these goals, or is he just maintaining a plateau and status quo of the goals that have been set forth for him in his contract? Is he trying to evolve the company?
My feedback is impacts and maintains I don't like. Can we make that a little clearer than that, Molly? Is there a way to clean this up?
Yeah,
Mr. Chair?
there's too many words there, so Charles Harris initiates goals for, what Bob was going on, initiates goals for goals, impacts, and initiatives, and adapts programs for the benefit of the organization.
Mr. Chair,
Does that
if I may
work?
address what Member Bybee just said. If you go back to question number 6, I think this is really redundant. We've asked if he manages the organization effectively, if he, we were rewording it in the way that Mr. Lucy recommended, but does he face obstacles? I think this is asking yet again. I mean, I don't know how to measure his drive, but you're asking, I guess, if he can adapt and do new things. And so I don't know if we need both 6 and 14, or if they can be combined, because one is more qualitative, like is he ambitious, or does he have drive? And the other is does he adapt programs for the benefit, I mean, I hope they're for the benefit of the RSCVA. Who else would they benefit? So maybe it's just a question of redundancy or wording or excessive wording?
I think you could combine the two.
I
And maybe
do
Molly's
think-
working on better
Because I understand
wording.
what Commissioner Lucy's saying, and we want.
Because you do want the goals.
I guess
You want the goals there.
the difference that stands out to me in regards to 6 versus 14 is that 6 is immediate. 6 is immediate, day-to-day, unexpected, quickly adaptations. 14 is long range. It's planning, it's strategy, it's developing initiatives, and I think developing initiatives that maintain, the benefit of the, something. I think the intent is, for 6, is how does he respond day to day? How does he respond? Is he dynamic? Is he flexible? Is he willing to participate in adopting new business? Whereas 14 is Mr. Harris sitting in his office saying, okay, I'm in 2022. What does 2023, 24, 25, 26 look like? How do I what are my long-range term goals versus what are my short-term goals? How do I build the team around that? How do I structure the organization? How do I build the board? How do I get people to those levels of understanding? And I think that is the intent. They're two different, I think, immediate versus long-term.
Well, maybe some of the language, Mr. Chair, if I might add to Commissioner Lucy, I think then we should take some of the words he just used, because if he's differentiating 6 from 14, it has a more, we took out day-to-day in number 6, so it is much more encompassing in terms of leadership and planning and adaptability. And maybe 14 is more what you indicated, Mr. Lucy, that it's about long-range planning and strategy, because the other is managing the organization. That's my only comment.
How about Charles Harris develops strategic goals and initiatives strategic goals, initiatives, and new business to impact the performance of the organization.
I like that much better.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, for future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that is
Good.
long range.
Yeah.
I would add long
For
range.
well, we have here, let's see, initiatives to impact the long-term performance
Yes.
of the organization.
Yes.
Long-term benefit.
That's more what you.
Long-term benefit.
Long-term benefit of the organization.
Long-term
Yeah,
benefit.
long-term, because
Benefit.
that differentiates it from 6.
Okay, I'm gonna reread this so that it's everywhere. Charles Harris develops strategic goals, initiatives, and new business to impact the long-term benefit of the.
For the
org-
long-term
For
benefit.
the long-term benefit of the organization.
I like that.
That's much clearer to Bob's point.
We have a go.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, 15 and 16, I didn't receive any comments. Unless anybody wants to discuss those, I'll move on to the next one.
Number 16, I would just delete. I don't know what that has to do with anything. I'm sorry.
I said 15 and 16 together.
So-
I didn't
I'm
receive
sorry.
comments to either
I'm
one of
sorry,
those.
I didn't make it clear. I was commenting on 15. I was commenting on 16.
Yeah, I would delete six.
I'd take that out. We don't have oversight of who he hires.
No.
We shouldn't. I don't want to deal with that.
Okay. I think 15, we received no comments unless anybody wants to discuss it.
I think
that's already been addressed.
I think it's already been addressed. I think it's repetitive to what
Yeah,
we
it's
just finished
already
discussing.
in an
short-term
earlier
and long-
question, pretty much.
Yeah.
So we want to delete 15 as well?
Yep.
Yeah.
It needs for change. I mean, I agree. It's-
Okay. Number 17, we have a suggestion to delete that one also.
Yeah, I think it's very subjective, and I'm not sure why we're asking that if we've answered all these other questions. This is, I don't know, a repeat of whether it's short range or long range. The whole, Bob's point about his initiative and such, and for the benefits of the RSCVA, whether it's day-to-day, short range, long-term, I think we've already addressed that. This is like just one more way to ask the same thing.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Harris that we probably need to delete it, but what I would say, maybe proffer a solution, Mr. Chair, is that through this, even though this question I don't feel is irrelevant, I feel is not relevant to this, the survey, what I would say is that maybe there at the end where there's a comment period, that this is part of the editorial preceding the comment period. Do you feel, Mr. Chair, that Mr. Harris has made quality improvements and impact to the RSCVA has been positive? And then allow them, or something to the effect, not necessarily positive, do you feel Mr. Harris has made quality improvements and impact to the RSCVA, period? And then allow anybody to edify that in the comment section, not just that sentence, but something to that effect that really gives somebody the ability to evaluate and say, these are my comments based upon, maybe not everything was curtailed in the survey itself, but I have an opportunity, something to that effect at the end, Molly, that when their commentary, that it's like productivity, effectiveness, positive change, things of that nature, to the end.
Question, just so you know, question 21
Yeah, I was just
is
about
that
to say.
open-ended, and it just
Yeah.
saes, I believe Charles Harris's
Yeah.
strong points as
That's why I think
president,
we
CEO of the
delete this.
RSCVA are.
Yeah.
It says strong points.
Right.
You could switch it to 17
No, I think we just take.
What I'm saying is that
or add it as additional one.
maybe add, has made quality improvements and impact to the RSCVA, period, to that sentence, to that 20 as an open-ended question with a comment.
So strike 17.
Strike 17 as an
Yeah.
actually approved, disapproved kind of thing, and move it down to just a pure commentary to allow for open-ended.
Strike 17.
Strike 17.
Okay. Moving on to 18. We also have a suggestion to strike
I
that.
thought it was repetitive
Yeah.
because we've already asked about. community
It's repetitive.
That one's out. Number 19, we've had a board member suggest striking it and another board member suggest modifying it.
I don't know what keen awareness is supposed to mean, or an importance as the taxation authority over hotel room tax and the development of room night. I mean, this is like a little statement within an overall reaching goal. And I don't know how you determine if he has a clear understanding.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I have a tendency to agree with Ms. Silver that it's really overworded in the sense that, but the organization is driven by room tax and is paid for via room tax. And as a room tax organization, having a vast understanding of how the room tax operates and the collectibles and kind of the underarching basis of that really is the foundation in which this organization not only funds itself, but also drives new business. So not necessarily understanding I believe that having a clear understanding of the organization's visions and goals is great, but maybe whoever the recommended suggestion change is that room tax play a major role, because as you're aware, 3 of the members of this board are from the hotel organization and from Nevada Resort Authority Association, and those individuals, you know, obviously have always been very about heads and beds, and that has always been, matter of fact, to the extent where we changed our mission statement just recently to reflect that. I think it is important that we leave that in there, but maybe wordsmith that to reflect that the importance of hotel room tax in the development of new room night business, and not necessarily a keen awareness of the overall finances and taxation. I think that's not for Mr. Harris to understand. Right. I think that's for his finance department to understand. I think that, but as a CEO, having an understanding, an overarching understanding of the ability about the importance of room tax and developing that and manipulating that in a way that is beneficial to this organization through coordination with those properties that are going to be participating, because it's not just casino properties. I mean, we have to be cognizant of that this is also any corporation hotel that just offers hotel rooms. This is VRBOs. This is a number of different assets throughout Washoe County that will provide for that room tax, and so and then how that room tax is going to be not only distributed but parlayed to the other organizations, so that there is relevance to the question. It's just about how that question is worded.
Mr. Chair, I agree with Commissioner Lucy that there is relevance in this. I think we couple a lot of words here that maybe we can simplify to say exactly what Bob indicated. You know, does Charles Harris place a strong emphasis on, or something to that effect, on room tax business and that, because the overall finances is a whole different thing than the importance of room tax. I mean, he oversees the CFO, so I assume he has a strong understanding. But I think, to Bob's point, there's a way to word this that parlays to those of our members who, and to our mission that is extraordinarily focused on room tax and room nights and heads and beds and that sort of thing.
Can I try a suggestion, maybe?
Sure.
Yeah, please do.
There's a difference between a DMO and a taxation-based organization. So I think that's, you know, as we know, DMOs operate differently than probably we do because of the self-funded. So that's all. I think that the clarity there is, this is definitely a different model in Reno, Tahoe, Sparks than it is anywhere else in the country, a little bit, when you really look at it, besides Vegas. So we're unique. Not a lot of people do this. So however you word it, just so we know that this is how.
How about this?
Can I add one more quick
sorry.
thing? Is it maybe two statements? I mean, is it really demonstrates a clear understanding of the organization's vision and goals as one, and then breaking down the overall finance, the importance of the taxation, development of new room nights, is that separate? Or do you want it under as part of the goals? Part of the vision and goals which would include the financial, understanding of the finances, which includes the room tax.
I would say that
importance.
I think they directly correlate, and the reason I say that is because without the ability to place individuals in rooms, you cannot fulfill the vision and goals, and the vision and goals are solely around bringing visitors to the region via tourism, and so they do correlate. And so I think it's important to know how you get your revenue so that you can spend your revenue. And so if you don't know how to achieve your revenue, then you don't know how to spend your revenue, and so you'll never be able to do one without the other. So I do think they do directly correlate, and there's a way to probably word that so that the correlation is there without, because, yeah, you can hit the visions and goals, but if you can't sustain the vision and goals without having the revenue to support that, you can understand the revenue all day, but how does it correlate directly into because collecting money, and remember, we're not collecting the money. The properties are collecting the money and giving it to the organization, so it has to be a correlation of when we collect the money, how that goes back into to continue the cycle. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and we would hope, we would hope that he does have a keen understanding of that, or we wouldn't have hired him. And he's been here almost 2 years. So, I mean, it's kind of a given, but I understand what you're saying.
How's this? Charles Harris furthers the organization's vision and goals by demonstrating a clear understanding of the importance of hotel room tax and development of new room night business.
Yes. That
Just
works
take
for me.
clear out, if, I just don't know how to
By
evaluate.
demonstrating
clear.
an understanding.
Or an emphasis on, or some, but I don't know how to evaluate his understanding.
I said Charles Harris furthers the organization's vision and goals by demonstrating a clear understanding of the importance of hotel room tax and development of new room night business.
I would just say by placing an emphasis on, instead of a clear understanding of the importance.
Emphasis, yes. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
A
whatever, priority, or,
prioritize.
but I think it's a lot, there's a whole
But
sense.
it's not really a priority, it's more of an emphasis, because it
emphasis
really is
on-
the driving revenue source.
Yeah,
Charles Harris furthers the organization's vision and goals by emphasizing
Yes,
the importance of hotel room tax.
yes.
perfect.
I think that
That's more to the
curtails
point.
the understanding and intent of what we're trying to do in regards to revenue generating. Thank you.
Okay, moving on, question 20. We've had a suggestion to delete that question.
Well, 20, weren't we going to try to integrate?
Yeah. It's a redundant.
That was actually
Yeah.
21.
Was it 21?
Yes.
Okay, so 20, we're gonna, okay. You said 20, and I hadn't gotten that
It's
far,
okay.
I didn't read that far ahead yet. Yeah, and so 20, so strike 20. 21, I believe we integrate the verbiage from 17. Charles Harris has made quality improvements to impact the RSCVA as president and CEO of the organization, or something to that member, or something
I
to
would
that
agree.
effect. As an open-ended question.
Can you say that one more time? Sorry.
Yeah. I believe Charles Harris has made quality improvements and impact to the RSCVA as president and CEO of the organization. Those are open-ended.
So does that replace 21, or is that an additional open-ended
No,
question?
it doesn't replace,
It's just an additional
You were
open-ended
integrating.
question.
It replaces 21, it just combines 21 and 17.
Okay, Molly, are you good with that? Yes. Question 22, I believe Charles Harris could improve by, and we've got no comments to that. Are we good with that one? I think you should do that. And then,
Board can approve.
Yeah.
It's not us.
Well,
and then 23 is just sort of a general catch-all if there's any comments that haven't been picked up on anything prior. So we're good with that?
Good.
I'm just reading this for the first time, and I guess these are anonymously submitted, although we each sent you them under our name. But who would possibly suggest this question? Does the CEO speak disparagingly about board members? I mean, what is that? And that's outrageous, and I take great offense to that, given 20 hours at least that Rick, Stephen, and I spent going through whatever you want to call it, a reset of the board and Charles's conduct with one another. And now someone suggests this be a question on his evaluation survey? I mean, I'm just speechless. I just saw it, I just actually read it. So I'm just going to make that statement for the record.
I don't care if you strike it, whatever, what's the
Yeah.
group want to do? 'Cause it's,
I don't think it's appropriate. I think
think
it's
it's-
combative, and I don't think that when we're doing a survey, we have an opportunity, every one of us, on all these open-ended questions, we can say whatever we want. You know, and we're all going to
Put that
make
in-
whatever comments
Right.
we're going to make, but to survey the whole board on a statement like this, I think is
It's
totally
combative.
inappropriate.
Yeah, I
No,
do too.
I agree.
Both of them are, I feel.
All of them.
All of them.
None of those questions should be added.
So the second one, to CEO foster positive relationships amongst board members, community, and staff, we're going
It's
to
just
reject that one
inciting
also.
again, something we've already gone over. Yeah.
Okay.
That's just-
All right,
There's more to look at?
so that's the set of board questions. The next is the Exhibit B, the set of staff questions. The comments to staff questions are a little more limited, so let's just jump in. So question number 1 there, board members suggested adding the word effective to leadership.
Mr. Chair, and may I make a comment? Because once again, I'll state that I think having 5 categories of strongly agree, neither agree nor disagree, disagree and strongly disagree are extensive and need to be condensed.
Yeah.
I also just have a theoretical, or let me say, principled position about anonymous surveys. I believe there's a place for what I used to call climate surveys done internally when a CEO or senior executive wants feedback and wants to know how an organization internally is operating. I don't understand why I think it's 6 or 7 executives, in the spirit of transparency and accountability that we've emphasized over and over again, can then do anonymous responses to these questions. I don't understand. We're trying to accomplish accountability and transparency, and then we're letting a certain number of people anonymously evaluate their boss, which I think can be vindictive both ways. So I think a CEO can always do a survey. I mean, I usually feel you got to be careful what you wish for, because if you're asking how people feel, you've got to be prepared to react to what they say. But this is, I think leads to a sort of combative tone when you're anonymous and you can say anything you want about your boss, and we're supposed to then, he's our only employee. If they don't like working for him, they don't have to work here. But I'm not sure how this is, and I know Molly and I probably disagree with this, but I'm not sure this is very conducive to having anonymous feedback from employees.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Ms. Silver, I appreciate your commentary, and with you're very inept and very intelligent, and have spent many years in the private sector doing a number of different things. You know, and unfortunately, and so have I, and I agree with you on a lot of these, that, you know, you got to be careful what you wish for sometimes. Unfortunately, you know, in the public process, which over the last 8 years I've learned very detailed that this is not a private corporation. This is very much a open book, open chapter. There are many rules and guidances that provide for this collective, hence the reason of the organization structure in regards to the board. And as a whole, I understand your willingness to say that this, anonymous, but as much as the staff works here and may have a job here, they're a citizen as much as everybody else. And every citizen gets the opportunity to, whether they're a public citizen that comes and speaks in public comment or participates, but every citizen and has the opportunity to, and for me, it's the voters. For 3 of the members, it's voters. For a number of us, it's our boards. For a number of us, it's our employers. And I think it's important, especially for the elected individuals, to have this type of clarity from the staff, because yes, Mr. Harris is our only employee. However, every individual that works for this organization, unless they live in California, is represented by somebody on this board. And I feel important and in that they have the ability to, I don't disagree that, maybe the condensing to agree in neutral or disagree with the ability for commentary. But remember, I don't think this is wholly ability for Mr. Harris to opine upon a broader understanding of what is out there, not only amongst his board, amongst his staff, and amongst the entire, public, to make those changes. And so, this is an opportunity to give voice to those that may not necessarily have the ability to stand up and speak to the board and provide that kind of, because we're the only ones who can decide his employment. We can't decide whether or not, and we need to have a scope picture. We can't just see what's in front of the curtain. We need to also see what's behind the curtain. And as you've pointed out very clearly today, we don't know what happens day to day. However, the individuals that are here do know what happens day to day. And so this is not necessarily representative of his ability to accomplish the goals set forth by him, by the board. This is ability about how he goes and accomplishes those goals, or doesn't accomplish those goals, or doesn't address those goals. And so this is the opportunity for those individuals, and giving them and like I've said, been through this process a number of times. Firefighters, employees, staff, it all comes down to, you have to take everything with a grain of salt and understand the individual that they're talking about. And whether you choose to or not to believe in the commentary that is provided. And so what I would say is that this gives an opportunity, because if you start shutting off the staff from their ability to speak and giving them and taking away their voice, then you are muting them for their ability to truly help evolve, because we want everybody to buy in and believe in the organization. And if they can't buy in and build the organization alongside and build a team and a culture with Mr. Harris, then there is a problem, because then we're rotting from within, not from the outside. And so that is a problem. And so I think to identify, and we're looking at it at worst case scenario, this may come back very positive. And so remember, this is painting a picture of an overall understanding of what is going on and transpiring. Now, you might have that one disgruntled employee, but you're not going to have 100 responses or different things that say that, if you do, then we've really got a problem. And that's maybe because we don't know what's going on from day to day. But if you have one response that's negative and the rest are wholly positive, then that's a positive thing. And also, and let me just give this the caveat, when we went for the $2 surcharge, this was part of this. Mm-hmm. This was part of these types of goals, and part of the, what I like to call the failed to loan bill, we have to do this. This is not a, can we do this, should we do this? We have to do this. This is, you can ask Miss Teresa Benitez Thompson to come down here and explain that to you, but we have to do this. This is imperative, because this is part of that bill that was about the compensation and the different things and understanding what was going on within the organization. And so they're going to ask for these types of things, the legislature, which is the guiding principle behind this organization as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Two things I'd like to add, then Molly, I want you to weigh in, if you could, on a professional opinion. First of all, looking at this, board member suggestions above, every board member that we did send this wants this to go through, I think, because it says no comments. We're quasi-governmental. I've been through this even in the private practice, and now we're a public company versus, this is quasi-governmental the way it's set up. So you got to have, what we use this word very transparency. But the point is, this is just the simplest, cleanest way. And Molly, I think there's some legal issues here that
Well,
should
from
weigh in
the
on.
standpoint of legal issues, I would just say it is part and parcel of the policy. That is part of the contract, which was entered into with Mr. Harris, that executive staff would, feedback from executive staff would be solicited using a survey. And so that is the basis for the reason why this is done and at that level.
Well,
But Molly, can you, my
I wanna-
understanding
oh, go
is
ahead.
that I thought either you or Ben told me that the difference with the employees compared to those of us that are in this quasi-governmental and some of us governmental, is that the employees, they are allowed to be anonymous because you're protecting them where we have to be transparent in our public meetings. The staff doesn't fall under that same requirement. There's something legally that prohibits us from getting their names on that. Is it a legal stance that we have to comply with?
In various different issues, we have taken the position that employees' names and employees' employment and issues related to their employment and et cetera are confidential under those type, it's open meeting law issues. With respect to, how this reporting is done in the packet, even with, it's just a survey report, and Mr. Harris actually has one that was done last year. It doesn't say everybody's specific name with respect to how they responded to every specific question. And so even with respect to the board member, these, think of them as performance reviews. They are tools for the board to use when you go to the public meeting on the feedback to give the overall public required, statutorily required review at the public meeting.
Let's move on, and any questions about this? Because it's, the majority of the board members would like them in, so, would like to survey in, so.
And again, we are not we're not here to make a decision as to whether or not this survey would go forward or not. That would require a policy change.
Yeah.
We are here to look at the questions and submit those questions to the board for, as revised.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go, that number one, there was the one suggested change to add effective to leadership. Any issue with that? Good.
Fine with me.
Question number two, there was a suggestion to add following the strategic plan roadmap at the end of that question. Any issues there? Okay. Question three, no issues. Any comment, discussion? Question four, no issues. Question five, no comments. Question six, there were some suggested revisions to that one. Just, anybody have an issue with them? Want to discuss? Nope. Number seven, no comment. Number eight, no comment. Number 9, no comments were received. Number 10, suggested revision, sort of some wordsmithing. Any issues there?
I think we're getting a little redundant on some of these questions. You know, I don't want to take more time. I know everybody's anxious to wrap up. I just think a lot of these are redundant. I mean, he's establishing goals ambitiously. He's demonstrating quality of analysis and judgment. He's serving. I just think I just listened to Commissioner Lucy, and I'm taking all that in. I do think there's a difference with elected officials who run for office. That's a survey in itself. But I just don't believe in surveys, anonymous surveys. I think there are patterns and practices that have been established for providing feedback about one's boss. But with that said, I just think there are a lot of these that are redundant. I'll just leave it at that, and if Molly has any opportunity to perhaps look at them from a
We would need to have that
standpoint.
guidance right now, so I think we need to get to a final set. If there are some that you think are redundant, go ahead and point those out and we can see about deleting any of them. But I think we need to get to, in order to get to a motion, we need to get to a set of questions that the committee would be able to move to recommend for approval to the board.
Of course, some of these are repetitive because they came from the board survey.
Yeah.
And now we've got to look at just individually what we have for staff.
Right.
Because they won't see our survey.
Right.
You know, Mr. Chairman, and to Councilwoman Bybee's comments, I agree. I think I've read through all the questions now, and giving staff the opportunity to answer however they see fit, whatever spurs their information. I don't see there any reason for it to be limiting. If they choose to participate, they choose to participate. If they do not, they don't. You know, those are questions. And we're not talking about an extensive amount of individuals. We're talking about, you know, a very select amount of individuals that will provide feedback. I don't think wordsmithing, there's massive wordsmithing in here that takes, I think what the massive wordsmithing was done for the board member survey, but I think allowing these questions to be answered by staff however they see fit should be at their discretion. And to Ms. Silver's point earlier, agree, disagree, neutral, or in allowing them to provide specific comment on each topic as they see fit, because there might be some way one question is worded that another question isn't, because the way I may read something, as we've seen already today, Ann and I see it sometimes very differently. Allowing them more of an in-depth or an extensive way to evaluate Mr. Harris's performance within the organization is a positive one. I don't think wordsmithing this is going to change the outcome. I think they are going to either answer one way or another. I don't think there's any reason that this should be wordsmithed any kind of specific way.
Thank you. Just going through everything,
On any of the, and most of these don't have a lot of comments. I'm looking at number 11, and I don't really kind of feel like it's for staff, that is an applicable question. You know, how is he
Some
an
staff
effective
might.
spokesperson and representation for the organization? I think that's more, the board looks at that. I don't know that that's a staff-related question, so I'm looking at whether we want to remove that.
I would recommend deleting 11.
Okay.
I agree. No doubt
Okay.
about it. Yep.
And I think number 15, I think to Mr. Lucy's point, this is an employee survey, so it's whether Charles is available to the employees.
Yeah, that to me is,
I'm
Yeah.
not interested in, they don't evaluate that.
agree.
I feel better. No, I was revising it.
Wordsmith.
It's available to the employees. Yeah.
Let's back up that 14. Do we want to take out 14? That was,
Yeah, I recommended,
Oh, did you recommend?
I don't know how the staff evaluates whether Charles has demonstrated effective skills in program developments and community engagement. That's just what we put on our survey to
Yeah.
evaluate. So I'm
And I'm
not going to argue.
I'll look at I'm going to
Look at any-
change this and to put on, maybe try to approach this from a staff perspective. Mr. Harris has 3 prospective departments that he oversees that have institutional knowledge. Not that Mr. Harris doesn't have institutional knowledge in regards to those specific departments. However, how those programs are developed in conjunction with those departments, I think it does have relevance to whether or not one department feels that a program that Mr. Harris may institute may have impact, positive or negative, towards that. You know, is he receptive to those programs and how that might, because universally, when we're talking about seeing the forest through the trees, you may want to, a program that might impact finance may create a deficit within operations or marketing or sales. And so I want to make sure, I do think that question is relevant from an executive standpoint for them to the ability. So now, if you want to reword that.
No, I'll
to-
stand down on
to that extent, but I believe that it is important that if Mr. Harris implements a program in one facet that has detriment to another, it could cause. So I think that does give the ability for the executives to discuss and say, can we or are we being able to converse amongst ourselves and do that instead of, you know, just implementing, you know, a forceful implement. Yeah. So that's my intent.
Charles Harris has demonstrated effective skills in program development for the entire organization, or how are you?
Honestly, I don't see any issues with the question as it's drafted. But, well, it's demonstrated effective.
Because we're on 14, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's program, I think it should be development, I think it should be department-based programs.
Charles Harris has demonstrated effective skills in program
program
development
development.
for your department?
How about department
For each
initiatives?
department.
Department initiatives.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's even
Effective
better.
skills in department initiatives?
yeah, I think that's more important.
Yeah.
I think that's really what we're trying to do.
That breaks it down to the 3 areas you're talking about.
Correct.
Yeah, there you go.
No community engagement.
No.
I don't think community engagement. I
That's
think
not
community
relevant.
engagement is a board issue, not
That's not relevant to
So
me.
just to confirm, it's to read, Charles Harris has demonstrated effective skills in department initiatives?
correct.
Right.
Can I just go back, Mr. Chair, to, I'm sorry, go back to number 7. I didn't submit a comment at that time. I don't know if that prevents me from doing it now, but I'm waiting to hear from Mr. Lucy on this. If the staff is in a position to understand what he understands, or whether he utilizes a solid working knowledge of significant developments and trends. I mean, that's his job. I mean, that's why we hired him. I don't know what we're trying to get at here.
I actually don't want to take it out.
So I don't know what
I'd like to leave it
an
in.
employee
I
would.
think I'd leave it in just
Yeah.
because I think
I really
remember,
think
once
you can
again,
give
we're
them a
trying to
shot
paint
at
the picture.
You know what I
for
mean?
Charles,
Yeah, I
you
got
know,
it.
and
I got
this
it.
gives their
Yeah.
Okay.
They have a vote.
I don't see either questions as they're gotcha questions. you
No,
know?
no, no, I
think
wasn't
they're-
suggesting.
I think they're questions that provide maybe, you know, overarching input to what his overall objective is, so that he can parlay from department executives to the board effectively. And if he doesn't see maybe the stone unturned, maybe they're more willing to put it in writing versus addressing, you know, people do it different.
Well, and actually it would affect, if you look at it department by department, I mean, would bring it down to whatever my level was. If I was finance, I'd be looking at what are significant developments related to finance for me, and what new trends for marketing are there. So I see it can be applicable depending on what position I'm in. And am I seeing that helping me as I do my job in whatever department that is?
Where are we at?
All right, I think we're on number 16.
Right.
We've got no board member comments to 16. Moving on, 17, we've had suggested being deleted. Yep, we're okay with that.
Do you agree? Yeah. We agree. Noted.
Okay. 18, the same. There's a suggestion to delete that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's called,
And then 19, 20, 21, and 22 are the, well, let me see. So 19, there's been suggested no changes. 20, 21, and 22 are the open-ended questions. We didn't receive any input on those. So are we good with those as written?
Yes. Yes.
All right. So that is through the questions. Exhibit C, I put to the extent got comments from board members that were not specific changes to the questions, but were more narrative and overall. And I think we've addressed most of them. I think the only one we haven't discussed, and we can discuss this at the board level, is a board member has suggested that the employee survey go out to all employees and not just the executive employees.
And my comment to that would be that that is a policy change and something that is not to be decided or recommended today.
Right.
Would have to go to the full board for change.
Right. I just want to flag it because the person that put it in there may want to know why I didn't if I don't. So with that, I think we have everything we need on the.
Quick question. So Ben, did we decide, I know we discussed it earlier, but on C is what Ann was talking about the survey responses be agree, disagree, or no comment, or no response.
So
are
I
we
took it
good on that?
I took it that we're reducing it to the 3 with the option to comment on each question.
Thank you.
And also,
For both surveys.
I just want to be clear that we want to group the types of questions into these categories. Is that still what the committee would like to recommend? Is as part of Exhibit C, a board member had made some broad brushes on the types of categories that the questions were in, so that you group all the same questions in together. So I just wanted to know if you wanted it done in that manner.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Yes. Thank you. A survey is meant to be completed from start to finish. Whether you have subcategories or you don't have subcategories, I don't think that there's any relevance to whether the I'm only going to answer finance questions because I don't. Our fiduciary responsibility as board members is to wholly understand every facet of this organization. And for the employees that will be responding to the survey, I think it's their fiduciary responsibility as well to wholly respond one way or another. And so to categorize them, I don't I don't see a purpose in categorizing. You can. It doesn't change one way or the other way how I'm going to answer. It just I mean, it's more clerical than it is anything, and I don't know if it serves a purpose necessarily as from a clerical standpoint or what the ultimate outcome will be. I think ultimately you either choose to answer or you choose not to answer. And so I don't think clarifying it under financial operations, strategic planning, blah, 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 makes any difference.
And it may also reflected that we eliminated a lot of questions. So there might only be one question in a category. So it may, now that
No.
we've gone through that process, it may be that there's no.
I think it should be the survey as a whole and give the opportunity for any individual to answer the questions in its entirety and really speak to the efficacy of the organization from both the employees and the board member in regards to Mr. Harris's ability to improve and move this organization forward. And that's really what it should be about, nothing about specific, and from a standpoint of an employee, if you start, singling out departments and specific categories, it could be a little bit more distinguishing in regards to who's answering, who's not answering. It takes away from the anonymity. And so I would say that allowing for it to be, if you don't know what you're talking about in regards to finance, and I don't think any of the questions or anything that speaks specifically to one department or one specific, I think it's an overall overarching understanding of Mr. Harris as an individual and as a leader of this organization versus his competency to understand finance better than operations or sales better than marketing. I don't think that's relevant in the discussion. I think what's relevant in the discussion when it comes to specific departments is his ability to hit his goals that have already been established through the strategic planning process, not specifically through this is more of a cultural study than it is a specific departmental study.
Mr. Chair, may I speak? What I like about it is that it organizes it. And Molly, correct me if I'm wrong, all of these sentences that we agreed on with all the rewording on them, you and Ben are going to look at putting them into the different categories. So when I've got, and we've already decided on the questions, so the questions are all done deal. This is just organizing them by a category in order to, for me, and maybe that's where my right brain left-handed, which you can probably agree with me here, to organize them into those boxes so that my theme and my mind as I'm going through them, I'm on strategic development and plan execution or whatever you guys decide to call it. Those questions are all in line with whatever, and we have several that address vision, goals, strategic plan, budget and finance. There's a few, not a whole lot. Sales and marketing. I mean, each one, a lot of them are community relations outreach and administrative HR executive team oversight. That the questions we've decided on go into those boxes. So as I'm responding, I'm on the same track where I'm like, okay, we're talking about HR executive team oversight. Here's the questions related to that I'm going to be answering or, putting filling out my survey and then making comments as appropriate instead of bouncing all over the place, which actually that's usually how my brain works. So surprisingly, having it organized like this, for me, I think just keeps your mind into each of those boxes and organizes it a little bit better and keeps you on task with whatever that category is. And if these titles are not okay and you guys find a better way to state what this other group of questions are, that we don't have a title here and you guys put it in there, it just kind of keeps it organized and easy to follow too. So I don't know, that's just my input.
And I'm not sure that the SurveyMonkey, yeah. It may be that I think it just, you can put just the questions. I don't know that I can put titles to sections. I'm not an expert by any stretch.
No, I think you're right.
Okay.
This has, if I may, Molly, this has no bearing on anything the committee just recommended either way. This has no ramifications to anything the way we lay it out, right? I mean,
it was just, Exhibit C was just additional comments that were received by us from board members, and they weren't particular to the questions themselves, they were just an overarching thought.
right.
So if we are good with that, on the front page of the memo, at the very bottom there's a possible motion.
Where'd you make that? Do we have a motion to?
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Charlene Bybee for the record. I move that the staff survey and board survey questions be revised by legal counsel as discussed and submitted to the full RSCVA Board of Directors for board consideration at a future RSCVA Board of Directors meeting.
I second that motion. Ann
We've got a
Silver.
motion by Charlene, and we've got a second by Ann. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? None. Seeing none, motion passes. Move to the board. Yeah, comments from committee members or CEO or president? Mr. Harris?
Thank you all for, I know this is tough, not easy for anybody, and I appreciate the time that all you put into getting this done. And my comments at the outset were not in any way intended to think anything's going to change, because to Bob's point, I signed that agreement and I own that agreement. But I think that in terms of improving my recommendation to this board for the future would be to look at those staff questions. That's part of in my eyes, a 360 that should be done as part of a whole organization. When you do that, not just the CEO, as ways to improve the organization, as a way to improve communication, and I do believe that that should be separate than the evaluation. So first of all, thank you all for all the hard work, and thanks for listening to my feedback.
Madam Clerk, do we have any comments?
Not at this time. Thank you.
None at this time, seeing none. Okay. Item H, adjournment. Can somebody make a motion? I would have to make a motion. I love using this. Bang, adjourned.